Now we'll turn to the weekend's hurling. There were wins for Clare against Cork, so it's 3 wins for 3 from 3 for Clare. There was a win for Kilkenny against Waterford, who are 0 for 3. It's Kilkenny's first win of the campaign. And on Saturday night, Tipperary beat Wexford. Jamesie O'Connor is standing by to talk in the main about Clare, really, as they sit top of Division 1A. Jamesie, you're very welcome. First point first, I noticed when I texted you to come on this evening, and we don't text often enough, clearly, because this was last year, actually, which is far too long. And it was a message from you, and I don't really know what the context is, but you said, Blur all the way, Joe, it's a no-brainer. And I can only presume there was an Oasis Blur conversation happening.
Something to that effect, I think, Joe. Yeah. I felt you needed support at the time, so I came to your aid.
I think I was trying to explain to Kevin Kilban that although Oasis initially had maybe some great success and were very good, but that Blur won the war, I think, was my point from memory.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with that, Joe. Yeah.
And
go along with that.
Were you an Oasis fan at the time as well?
I probably was. I remember. I'd say, yeah, definitely. Maybe might have been on the disc, man. I'd say maybe heading to Croke Bar for some of those games in the mid-90s. Yeah, guilty of that.
Because that was a good time to be young and playing sport. If I remember, from a musical point of view as well, if I remember correctly, Keith Wood on the Lions tour in South Africa, the Lions song that they sang in the bus all the time was Wonderwall, which is where they stood. So I don't know what the Clare sing-songs were on the bus. Was it Blur, Oasis? These are obviously the big issues to get into tonight.
No, yeah, more like Daly and some of those other heathens. I'd say wouldn't have been into Blur, Oasis. Lohan was into the Pixies, all right, and the Lohans would have a decent musical taste. But Dalo, I'd say the boys, Christy Moore.
Well, that's fair enough. I thought you were going to say Daniel O'Donnell for a second there, who
no,
put in a star turn last night on the TV. So that key point aside, we asked you on to talk about Clare and how excited everybody should be about Clare, or otherwise. They beat Cork 23 points to 19 in front of 5,000 in Ennis. I mean, I don't envy you being a pundit at this time of year. It's really near impossible to analyse anything that you're seeing with any degree of certainty. That should be our jumping off point here.
Fair point, Joe. Now listen, from a Clare perspective, to start the year with wins over Tip, Kilkenny and Cork, you can't complain. I think it's 97 in the championship since we last had those 3 scalps in our back pocket at the same time. And I didn't realise it, but we hadn't beaten Cork, I think, in the League or Championship since the replay, obviously, in Croke Park in 2013. So there was a bit of pain had been inflicted on us by Cork. So listen, great start to the league. Now that said, I think you need to keep things in perspective. It's still only February. We probably are fitter, I'd say, than arguably any other team in the country at the moment. We've the players have a serious bank of work done in November and December. So we are fit. I think management maybe targeted the first 3 games, to get wins on board, get the points on board. That takes care of any relegation issues. We're probably guaranteed a quarter-final spot now, and maybe the scope then to experiment from here on out. So, we've had probably stronger teams out in those 3 matches than our counterparts. Tip probably had 5 or 6 championship starters. Kilkenny probably something along the same, and Cork probably had 8 or 9 of their championship 15 from last year, whereas we've probably had 11, 12, 13. So okay. I think we just need to keep things in perspective. But listen, sitting on top of Division 1 is not a bad place to be, and as I said, the pressure is off now, and management maybe can get a look at a few different guys in the games to come. Yeah,
Tommy Walsh was on OTB AM this morning. He made this point about Clare.
We seen it with Clare yesterday. I'm not sure, did you see the Clare match yesterday? There's a massive difference for me with Clare this year. They have a huge balance. They always have these small, little, skillful, fast players. Now they have DC and Duggan thrown into the mix. So now when the short option isn't working, you can throw it up long, and you have a chance of scoring a goal or scoring a point. And I thought with Kilkenny yesterday, like Mossy Keown brings that to the team. He's a strong runner, even though he's only 19 years of age. His father, he was a warrior himself back in the mid-90s. He won an All-Ireland there in 93 with Kilkenny.
Is that a fair point? Are there a few more options for the man on the ball in this Clare side now?
Yeah, again, I think you need size, Joe, particularly in the half-forward line. And, Peter Duggan obviously did really well when he came on against Tip in the quarter-final last year. Niall Deasy had a great club campaign with Ballyea. And, we need to give these guys their opportunity now and find out what they have to offer. And as Tommy said, it gives you the option of going long. You have a ball winner, or certainly a physical presence in there. And Cathal Malone came off the bench yesterday. He played championship last year. He's again a very honest, type of player. So yeah, I think Tommy's right. You can't probably play David Reedy and Podge and Tatsi O'Connell, and a couple of other small players. Given, we'll say, the size and physicality that the Tip and particularly Galway and Waterford bring. So I think management have just recognised that. And, it was good to see DC getting game time yesterday. Duggan, has played in all 3 matches and done well. Now, whether these guys are going to be the finished product when the ball is flying around the place in June is another story. But yeah, I think, listen, you have to give them games, you have to give them the opportunities, and it takes time for young players to customise themselves to the pace of the game. I mean, I came into the Clare team in winter '92, Joe, probably convinced that, listen, the pace of this, it's faster, it's so fast you don't get any time on the ball. But it takes time to adjust to the fact that sometimes you do get a bit more time on the ball than what you think. And you have to get comfortable in that environment. And as I said, the same thing is happening in Kilkenny. Cody is giving Keown and some of these other guys the opportunity to see what they're made of, acclimatise themselves to Inter-County, and I think that's ultimately what this league campaign is going to be about for a lot of the management teams.
In some respects, 2013 almost has a big effect on when we talk about what to expect from Clare come championship time, and you look at the 2013 team, and quite a number of those players that were there in 2013 are no longer there. This is not necessarily the same team, but there is still this general sense that, well, what have you done since then, Clare? And this was just a moment of opportunity with Tipperary and Kilkenny having off years. So when you tally all that in, what are realistic expectations for Clare come championship time, or do we know yet?
Well, I don't think we know yet, Joe, but I mean, obviously from a Clare perspective, Munster is going to be unbelievably competitive. Yeah. Tip, Waterford, Cork and ourselves, and Limerick are coming strong as well. I mean, so, only 3 teams emerge. There's going to be a lot of disappointment, or at least 2 seriously disappointed teams, that will feel for all the work they've put in, they've underachieved. But as you said, listen, it's very much Jerry and Donald's team now. Yeah. We probably didn't kick on from 2013 the way we would have hoped and the way we would have liked. Do we underachieve? I would say we probably have, given the fact that we haven't made it back to Croke Park. And I think that's the key for this bunch of players now. To get back to Croke Park, to get us, to make it to the last 4. And okay, we probably had chances, maybe, and opportunities. I don't think we deserved to win the Munster final, but it certainly was one that could have been won. Again, we were probably disappointed, coming out of Páirc Uí Chaoimh last year, having lost the Tip. But again, I still think the better team won on the day. So look, at the challenge for us is, the window's closing. For Tony Kelly and these guys now, they're arguably heading into the peak of their careers. Listen, they want more than anybody, Joe, to get back to Croke Park. So look, it's a good start to the year, but that's all it is. There's still a lot of work to be done, and ultimately, we're going to be judged not on how we do in the league, how we perform in the championship, and the first step is to make it, into that top 3 in Munster, get out of the province.
Yes, and never more than this year potentially will the management teams be so reliant on advice from S&C coaches and all the fitness people around teams. Like, even John Myler was making the point in the build-up to the game over the weekend that increasingly they're going to take learnings from professional sports like football or rugby, where there's games week on week on week, with a view to how much can you actually do with players between games. And there's this whole area for management teams to try and figure out over the coming while, and that's what's made the approaches to the league doubly interesting. Like you're saying there, Clare maybe are as fit potentially as they might be all year, and then you look at Derek McGrath and Waterford managing a completely different dynamic, and clearly felt he couldn't come back anything remotely close to full fitness this early. And who's going to be right and who's going to be wrong, and how we actually even judge that fairly is going to be a massive talking point over the next 2-3 months.
Hugely, Joe. Yeah, you're on the money there, and I think different counties have looked at it in different ways. Obviously, taking Waterford, they couldn't afford to come back, I think, in November and December and go at it hammer and tongs. That wouldn't have been the smart thing to do. Clare, I think, have a big bank of work done, and as you said, like, are probably as fit now as they're arguably going to be, come summer. So it's going to be about maintaining that and just keeping it topped up. Cork to me yesterday looked like a team, Joe, that had trained heavily during the week. Right. They weren't as sharp.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but even, and again, it goes back to our initial point about how difficult it is to analyse things. I would say Cork probably did train very hard during the week, because Malachy Clerkin in the Irish Times spoke to John Myler last week, and Myler was making the point that he's been generally missing about 17 players with Fitzgibbon and then another 3 with Kanturk, and actually this Clare game was almost the first time he had everyone back. So he may well have said, well, this is the first week I can get a good batch of work done with everybody. So sorry to interrupt, but that's absolutely very possible with Cork. I mean, I don't know for sure, but again, these are the if, buts, maybes and don't quite knows that we're working with.
Yeah, and listen, maybe Cork took it very lightly during the week. I don't know, but they just looked like a team that had let's say plenty of running in the legs during the week. Clare were certainly sharper early on. I mean, the game was effectively in the bag at half time. Clare were 11 clear, Joe, and had created a lot of scoring chances. Now Cork, Harrandy had a great goal chance that he really should have taken, and Cork had another goal chance later on that might have made life a bit more uncomfortable than it should have been. But yeah, it's really too early to judge. We're only going to know this, Joe, come summer, and I think teams then will look back and say, right, okay, well, this is the way Clare did it, this is the way Tipperary did it, this is the way Waterford did it, and this is the way to go. But again, it depends on how many players have you got with college commitments? Have you guys with club commitments, as for example Limerick and Dublin do? So I don't think there's any one size that's necessarily going to fit all, but teams will be looking retrospectively in September at who made it to the last 4, how do they do it, how do they approach the league, did they mix and match, did they, for example, keep some of their frontline players back onto the latter stages, having them fresh, ready, rested for the championship. So there's going to be plenty of talking points for later in the season, Joe.
Yeah, and as well, it's only 1 year. It's such a small sample size. Like, we're going to be talking, it'll be 4 or 5 years, 6 years before a reasonable sample size of how you do it has potentially built up, and by then the championship could change again. So it's an unbelievably tricky time to be a manager in that sense. And Brian Cody was talking actually about next week, and he was saying Kilkenny are going to release their Fitzgibbon Cup players, and he said, look, it's a really strange thing to see big matches clashing Fitzgibbon Cup with big league matches, but the college has to be respected and we have to look after the lads as well. I mean, I don't know. Look, I mean, we don't have a fixtures conversation either, but I mean, it's not great for the league either when you've got Kilkenny and Tip, and I presume Clare at the weekend as well, and you're releasing lads for Fitzgibbon, and there's league on. I mean, I don't want to use the word it's a mess, but it's very, very close to being a mess.
Yeah, no, and I think that's one of the disappointing things, because the Fitzgibbon weekend was always, I think, It was a weekend when you didn't have league matches on, where for some teams this is a big weekend, and these games count. You don't want to find yourself in relegation playoff or in the bottom 2. So yeah, and I think Cody historically would have felt that you probably, if anything, find out more about players in the heat and battle of Fitzgibbon than you necessarily do about them in the league game. I mean, this is a glorious competition. It's a great competition. I played in it, didn't win it, but have great memories. Of great one particular great battle with UL that we lost by a point in extra time controversially, and they went on and won it. So
it's not so simple as to say to the players, leave it behind and move on without it. Like, it's something that you feel is a huge value.
I think look at most managers would have sympathy with the Fitzgibbon players, because, and I feel sympathy for the Fitzgibbon management, because they probably have less access to their players now than they ever had, and that's a pity. And you'd hate to see that competition losing, given its history, given the traditions, given the value in which most of the players that have played in it were successful and hold it in. I'd like to see the Fitzgibbon weekend, being a weekend, we'll say, when there are no league matches and those decisions don't have to be made.
Yeah. One last quick question. I know obviously this is largely about Clare, but have you seen much of Kilkenny early doors? Brian Cody has banned journalists from using the word transition when they talk to him, which is beginning to work. People have stopped using that word with him, but he doesn't like that at all, and yet it does feel like the most apt description.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I was down in Porky Key for the opening match against Cork, and I mean, Killian Buckley went down with a serious injury with I think just the 68th minute, Joe, and it was a long stoppage in the play. I think Cork maybe won clear. They might have been level at that stage. And to be honest about it, you know, I think it was 7 minutes of stoppage time played. And up until that point, I mean, Kilkenny were right in it and could very well have got something out of that game. And I've liked what I've seen with, you know, Martin Keown and some of these younger players. You know, I think Cody Luke had probably recognised that, you know, he needed to go back now and maybe look at some of the younger players. And I think there's probably 15 or 16 of the under 21s, you know, on the training panel that maybe in the past, you know, he's gone for guys that maybe have been that bit older, that bit more seasoned, and maybe they're just not good enough now, and he needs to maybe cast the net, maybe you know, back towards the younger brigade. But there's talent in Kilkenny. You know, Kieran's have been winning Ireland colleges titles. You know, it's not been completely competitive at minor level, but you know, they're still going to struggle to replace. I mean, there's no signed founder replacement for Michael Fennelly, for example, and given what cost, you know, they've certainly come back to the pack, Joe. But Cody will find some players for the championship. There's no doubt about that. And you know, Tommy Walsh down in Cork is, I mean, Martin Keown is a club mate of his. I hurled and marked Liam Keown, his dad. I asked him that question, and you know, he rates him very, very highly, and he's been very, very good in the last 2 matches. So that's a big positive for Cody going forward.
Okay, Jamesie O'Connor, as ever, thank you.
Cheers, Joe. Good to talk.
Hey, hope you enjoyed that latest offering from Off the Ball. If you want to subscribe, and you should, check out just up here. All our latest stuff is just down here. Generally, knock yourself out.